There is a bottle sitting in almost every kitchen in America right now, and there is a very good chance it is quietly doing damage to your brain. Not the sudden, obvious kind of damage. The slow, accumulating, barely noticeable kind that builds over years while you follow every piece of dietary guidance you were handed since before your children were born. If you are in your 60s or 70s, or you are watching this because you are trying to protect your cognitive health before a problem develops, this may be the most important nutritional conversation you have had in a long time. The oil I am talking about is not exotic or unfamiliar. It is not a new arrival. You bought it last week. It has been marketed to you for decades on television, in magazines, by major health organizations as the lighter, cleaner, heart-healthy alternative to saturated fat. And the vast majority of people who cook with it every single morning have absolutely no idea what researchers have been quietly discovering about what happens inside the brain when this type of oil is consumed consistently over years, especially as we age into our 60s and 70s. My name is Dr. Conn. I work directly with patients in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, and one pattern I see with real consistency is this. Patients who are doing genuinely well by every visible measure, watching their diet, managing their cholesterol, walking every day, still come in describing the same quiet cluster of symptoms. A memory that feels like it is running a half second behind, a mental fog that builds through the afternoon, a difficulty concentrating that simply was not there at 55. When I began looking more carefully at what many of these patients had in common, beyond the standard risk factors, I kept arriving at one overlooked variable that most mainstream nutrition conversations never touch: what they were heating in their pans every single morning. Today, we are going to talk about exactly what the peer-reviewed research says about this, and then we are going to talk about what to do about it. The oil I am talking about is refined vegetable seed oil, specifically the category that includes canola oil, soybean oil, corn oil, sunflower oil, and cottonseed oil. The kind sold in large clear plastic bottles, often labeled with phrases like 100% pure, all natural, or ideal for high heat cooking. These oils now dominate the American food supply. They are used in restaurant kitchens, in fast food fryers, in packaged snack foods, in salad dressings, in margarine, and in the home kitchens of hundreds of millions of people across North America and Europe. Their rise to dominance began in the mid-20th century when saturated fats, butter, lard, coconut oil, were blamed, largely on the basis of studies that have since been heavily criticized for their methodology, for rising rates of heart disease. Seed oils stepped in as the approved replacement, riding a wave of institutional endorsement that was, in hindsight, built on incomplete and sometimes industry-influenced science. The key issue is not that these oils exist in nature. Many of them come from plants that are genuinely nutritious in their whole form. The issue is what happens to them during industrial processing, and critically, what happens to them again when you heat them in a pan at home. Refined seed oils are extraordinarily high in a type of fat called omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acids, specifically a compound called linoleic acid. Polyunsaturated means the fat molecules have multiple chemical double bonds, which sounds technical, but think of it this way. Those double bonds are structural weak points. They are like loose screws in a piece of furniture. In a stable, unprocessed environment, they are manageable, but expose them to heat, light, or oxygen, all of which happen every time you cook with these oils, and those weak points begin to break. When they break, they produce a cascade of chemically reactive compounds called oxidation byproducts. And it is those byproducts that researchers studying the aging brain have been paying increasingly close attention to in recent years. When refined seed oils are heated, even at temperatures most home cooks would consider moderate and entirely normal, the linoleic acid they contain begins to oxidize. This oxidation process produces compounds called aldehydes, including one called 4-hydroxynonenal, which scientists often abbreviate as H&E. Now, H&E is not a household name, but it probably should be for anyone over 60 who is thinking seriously about long-term cognitive health. Here is why it matters. The brain is made up of approximately 60% fat. It is one of the most fat-dense organs in the entire human body. and it relies on healthy, structurally stable fats to maintain the integrity of the cell membranes surrounding every single neuron. The nerve cells that carry every thought, every memory, every signal between your brain and the rest of your body. When oxidized compounds like H and E make their way into the body through the diet and eventually reach the brain via the bloodstream, they begin interacting with those delicate neuronal membranes in a way that researchers have described as neurotoxic, meaning potentially harmful to the cells themselves. Think of it like this. Imagine the neurons in your brain are electrical cables running through the walls of a house. Healthy dietary fats are like high-quality insulation, wrapped tightly around those cables, protecting the signal and keeping everything running cleanly. Oxidized lipid byproducts from repeatedly heated seed oils are like a slow-acting corrosive that works on that insulation over time. The cables do not short out immediately, but across years and decades of daily exposure, the protection degrades. The signals become slower, less reliable, more prone to interference. This is a simplification of genuinely complex biochemistry, but it captures something real about what the research is describing. And it is a useful frame for understanding why what you cook in every day may matter far more to the brain you are carrying around at 70 than most people and most doctors have ever suggested. The scientific literature here is not fringe or speculative. It has been building in respected peer-reviewed journals for well over a decade. A 2017 study published in the journal Alzheimer's and Dementia examined post-mortem brain tissue from individuals who had carried an Alzheimer's diagnosis and found significantly elevated concentrations of H&E modified proteins compared to age-matched healthy controls. The researchers noted that these molecular modifications appear to impair normal protein function within neurons in ways consistent with the biochemical changes seen in progressive cognitive decline. A separate and equally important line of research has focused on the broader question of dietary fat ratios and what they mean for the aging brain. Throughout most of human evolutionary history, the ratio of omega, 6 fats to omega, 3 fats in a human diet was estimated to be roughly 1 to 1, or at most 4 to 1. Today, for adults eating a standard Western diet, that ratio has ballooned to somewhere between 15 to 1 and 20 to 1, and in some heavily processed food diets, potentially higher. Because refined seed oils are the primary vehicle delivering omega-6 fats into the modern diet, they sit at the center of this dramatic imbalance. Omega-3 fatty acids, the kind found in fatty fish, walnuts, and flaxseed, are broadly anti-inflammatory and are considered neuroprotective, meaning the research suggests they may help maintain healthy brain function as we age. Omega-6 fats, in excess, and particularly when oxidized by heat, tend to promote the production of pro-inflammatory signaling molecules throughout the body. Chronic low-grade inflammation in the brain, a condition researchers call neuroinflammation, has now emerged as one of the most actively studied factors in age-related cognitive decline. A 2019 review published in the journal Frontiers in Nutrition analyzed data from multiple population studies and concluded that diets high in refined vegetable oils and low in omega-3 fats were consistently and significantly associated with higher rates of cognitive decline in older adults. This does not mean cooking oil alone determines your neurological fate. Brain health is complex and shaped by dozens of variables, but the dietary fat composition of what you eat every day is a meaningful, modifiable piece of the puzzle, and for most people over 70, it has never been seriously addressed. Before we go any further, if this kind of evidence-based information is useful to you, please take 2 seconds right now to subscribe to this channel. It means you will not miss the next video, and it helps this content reach more people who genuinely need to hear it. Now let us keep going, because we are just getting to the part most people never hear about. Let me tell you about a patient I will call Margaret. That is not her real name, but her situation is entirely real, and her story is one I have thought about often. Margaret came to see me at 71. She was sharp, engaged, and active. She walked every morning, did puzzles in the evenings, and kept up with her grandchildren in a way that would tire people half her age. But she had noticed something over the previous 2 years that was beginning to quietly trouble her. Not a dramatic decline, but a creeping one. She would start a story and lose the thread halfway through. She would read the same paragraph twice before it registered. She would walk into a room and stand there for a moment, genuinely unsure of why she had come. Her blood work was unremarkable. Her blood pressure was well controlled on medication. There was no notable family history of dementia. When I sat down and took a detailed dietary history, the kind of thorough nutritional walkthrough that busy clinical appointments rarely have time for, what I found was that her kitchen was built almost entirely around one ingredient: a large bottle of canola oil that she had been using exclusively for everything from sautéing vegetables to frying eggs to occasional baking. She used it because a doctor years earlier had told her it was the better alternative to butter. She had no idea there was a single reason to question that. When we discussed the research together and she made the shift to extra virgin olive oil for her daily cooking and added 2 servings of fatty fish per week, the changes she described over the following months were not dramatic. I want to be completely clear about that, because I am not presenting this as a miracle intervention. But she told me she felt sharper, more present, like the mental static had turned down. Whether that reflected a genuine neurological shift, a placebo response, or a combination of factors, I cannot say with certainty. What I can say is that her experience fits precisely what the biochemical research would predict, and it fits a pattern I have seen in a handful of other patients who made the same change. The omega-6-2 omega-3 imbalance I mentioned is worth spending additional time on because it is the specific mechanism through which a daily cooking oil choice can translate into real neurological consequences over a lifetime. Your brain cannot manufacture its own omega-3 fatty acids. It has to obtain them through diet. The most important omega-3 for brain function is called DHA docosahexaenoic acid. It is the dominant structural fat in the human brain, making up roughly 97% of the total omega-3 content embedded in brain tissue. It is woven directly into the membranes of neurons, where it influences how fluid and flexible those membranes are, how efficiently signals travel across synapses, the connection points between nerve cells, and how effectively the brain can repair cellular damage and manage inflammation over time. Here is the core problem. DHA and omega-6 fats compete for the same biochemical processing pathways inside the body. When you are consuming a massive excess of omega-6, which is exactly what happens when refined seed oils are your primary cooking fat, because these oils are typically between 50 and 70% linoleic acid, you are effectively crowding DHA out of those pathways. The enzyme systems that would normally convert and integrate DHA into brain cell membranes become overwhelmed by the sheer volume of omega-6 demanding to be processed first. Think of it like a single-lane bridge with heavy traffic in both directions. When omega-6 volume is 15 or 20 times higher than omega-3 volume, it is not sharing the lane, it is monopolizing it. And over years, not days, not weeks, but years and decades, a brain that is chronically undersupplied with adequate DHA becomes measurably more vulnerable. Have you ever found yourself wondering whether the mental fog you feel now has something to do with what you have been eating for the past 30 years? That question deserves a more serious answer than most people ever get. The membranes become less fluid, intracellular communication becomes less efficient, and the brain's capacity to handle oxidative stress, to clear metabolic waste, and to mount anti-inflammatory responses all begin to diminish, not all at once, but consistently, in a direction that compounds over time. There is another dimension of this issue that deserves particular attention, and it is one that affects older adults even when they are not cooking at home. I am talking about what happens when these oils are heated repeatedly, not just once in a home kitchen, but over and over again across hours and days, as happens routinely in restaurant kitchens, fast food operations, and commercial food processing. Each additional heating cycle accelerates the oxidation process and multiplies the concentration of aldehyde compounds in the oil. A 2015 study published in the journal Food Chemistry measured the aldehyde content of several widely used cooking oils after being heated to standard frying temperatures and found that refined sunflower oil, corn oil, and canola oil produce significantly higher concentrations of potentially harmful aldehydes compared to extra virgin olive oil and coconut oil under identical conditions. The lead researcher described the levels generated under standard commercial frying conditions as high enough to justify serious consideration of long-term health outcomes. For anyone over 70 who eats out regularly, purchases prepared grocery foods, or relies on packaged snacks as part of their daily diet, this is worth holding on to. The economic reality of food service kitchens is that frying oils are not changed frequently, which means the French fries, the fried fish, the packaged crackers, the store-bought soups, the bottled dressings, and many of the foods labeled all natural or lightly seasoned have been cooked in or manufactured with oils that have been oxidizing for hours or days before they reach you. This does not mean that a single restaurant meal is catastrophic. It means that for an older adult whose daily diet layers home cooking, packaged foods, and occasional restaurant meals, all drawing from the same category of refined seed oils, the cumulative daily exposure to oxidized lipid compounds may be far higher than anyone has ever told them to think about. And when that exposure has been continuous since the 1970s or 1980s, when these oils first systematically replaced butter and animal fats in the American kitchen, the total accumulated load is substantial. I want to pause here and ask you something directly. Have you or someone you love noticed changes in memory or mental clarity that seem to arrive slowly without any obvious explanation? Maybe a doctor told you it was just normal aging. Maybe you chalked it up to stress or poor sleep. Drop your experience in the comments below. I read every single one, and those conversations matter. Now let us talk clearly about what to do, because I never want to leave you with a problem and no direction forward. The research pointing away from refined seed oils points toward a specific and well-documented set of alternatives fats with demonstrated neuroprotective properties in the peer-reviewed literature, and with a long track record in populations with some of the lowest rates of cognitive decline and dementia anywhere in the world. The most thoroughly studied of these alternatives is extra virgin olive oil. The evidence here is both substantial and consistent. A landmark study published in 2015 in JAMA Internal Medicine, part of the large multi-center PRIDIME trial, conducted across research institutions throughout Spain, found that participants who incorporated extra virgin olive oil as their primary dietary fat showed significantly better performance on standardized cognitive tests over a 4-year follow-up period compared to a control group that followed a low-fat diet. The researchers attributed part of this benefit to a compound in extra virgin olive oil called oleocanthal, a polyphenol with well-documented anti-inflammatory properties that may also help facilitate the brain's natural clearance mechanisms for amyloid protein aggregates, the kind of buildup associated with Alzheimer's pathology. Extra virgin olive oil also has a fundamentally different oxidative stability profile compared to refined seed oils. Because it is predominantly composed of monounsaturated fat rather than polyunsaturated fat, it is considerably more resistant to heat-induced oxidation. The monounsaturated structure, think of it as having one vulnerable point in the molecular chain instead of many, is far less reactive when exposed to cooking temperatures. It does not generate the same cascade of aldehyde byproducts. This does not make it appropriate for extreme high-heat frying. Very high-temperature applications are inadvisable with virtually any oil, but for sautéing vegetables, cooking eggs, dressing a salad, or drizzling over soup, extra virgin olive oil is, based on the current weight of evidence, the most well-supported choice for brain health in older adults. Avocado oil is another strong option for higher heat applications, given its high monounsaturated fat content and comparatively stable thermal profile. I want to be clear about something before we close, because intellectual honesty matters here. The research I have discussed throughout this video represents the current and growing weight of scientific evidence in nutritional biochemistry and brain health. But nutrition science is always evolving, and individual dietary responses can vary based on genetics, metabolic health, medication use, and the overall composition of your diet. Nothing I have shared today is a prescription, and none of it replaces a real conversation with your own physician or a registered dietitian who knows your complete health picture. If you are on medication, particularly blood thinners or medications that affect lipid metabolism, please speak with your doctor before making significant shifts in your dietary fat intake. That said, here are the practical, evidence-supported steps the research points toward. Audit your kitchen. Look at every oil you own. If the label says canola, soybean, corn, sunflower, or cottonseed, consider replacing it with extra virgin olive oil for everyday cooking and cold uses, and avocado oil for higher heat applications. Reduce your consumption of packaged and fried foods where seed oils are nearly always the default cooking medium. This does not need to be absolute, but reducing frequency is meaningful over time. Increase your dietary omega-3 intake. Fatty fish, salmon, mackerel, sardines, and anchovies are the most bioavailable sources of DHA and EPA, the long-chain omega, three fatty acids most directly linked to brain health in the research literature. 2 servings per week is the target most consistently supported across cardiovascular and neurological research. Walnuts, flaxseed, and chia seeds provide a plant-based omega-3 called aldehyde, which the body can partially convert to DHA, though the conversion rate is modest. And finally, do not fear fat broadly. The decades-long war on dietary fat and the specific demonization of saturated fats that fueled the mass adoption of seed oils is now widely recognized as a significant oversimplification of the actual science. The quality and stability of the fat matters far more than the mere presence of fat on your plate. Let us bring everything together because there is a great deal here, and I want the most important points to stay with you clearly. The core message is this: refined vegetable seed oils, canola, soybean, corn, and sunflower oil are extraordinarily high in omega-6 polyunsaturated fats that oxidize when heated, producing toxic aldehyde compounds, including one called HNE that peer-reviewed research has found at elevated concentrations in brain tissue affected by Alzheimer's disease. The modern Western diet has shifted the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio in the human body to a level that is dramatically and historically out of balance. And that imbalance may be actively contributing to the kind of chronic, low-grade neurological inflammation that researchers increasingly recognize as a central driver of age-related cognitive decline. For adults over 60, and especially those over 70 whose brains are navigating the compounding challenges of aging, reduced neuroplasticity, slower cellular repair, increased vulnerability to oxidative stress. The daily choice of cooking fat is not a peripheral detail. It is a variable that compounds quietly over time, in one direction or the other, depending on what you choose. The genuinely good news is that this is one of the most actionable changes available to you right now. You do not need a prescription, a procedure, or an expensive supplement protocol. You need a different bottle on your kitchen counter and 2 servings of salmon on your weekly menu. The brain is remarkably responsive to the right raw materials, even well into its 7th and 8th decades of life, and giving it those materials costs nothing more than a different decision at the grocery store. In our next video, we are going to look at another common food that may be accelerating memory decline in people over 60, and the research behind it is just as eye-opening as what we covered today. Make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss it. If this video helped you, share it with someone you care about, and leave a like before you go. It helps this information reach the people who need it most, and I will see you in the next one.